Hello, it's Arthur from Artistry of Code podcast. Welcome to episode number 12 of our main series. This time we've met with Pierre de Wulf, developer brave enough to quit his regular job and start his own product, ScrapingBee. With Pierre, we'll be talking about how developers can look for ideas for their own businesses, what does it take to make a transition from developer role to a full-time business owner, what is ScrapingBee and what ScrapingBee has under the hood. Here we go.
Welcome to the Artistry of Code podcast, where we, together with our guests, are seeking ways of doing things right and having fun with it.
Software, architecture, soft skills, teamwork, and other crazy buzzwords.
Are you ready?
Let's bring more value to the business.
Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of the Artistry of Code podcast. Today's episode is again special because we are having the second guest in our history. Really, I'm not sure, Pierre, if you noticed, but you're really the second guest in our show, which we are very grateful because you are helping us very much in building up the show by your presence over here. So we're very, very grateful for this. So we've met up with Pierre to talk about, on one hand, his achievements, his history, how he ended up where he is right now. But let me just start off by saying a couple of words which I've prepared. So based on what I've researched in the internet without, going into the darknet, I found out that Pierre is a former data engineer who decided to forge his future by building his own stuff. He also is a co-founder of various products, things like Shop2List, Pricing Bot in the past, and now it's obviously ScrapingBee. Also, he's a Twitter celebrity. This is also a known fact. I've just also learned that Pierre, you used to tweet at least once a day, which makes me jealous. I'm not able to tweet once in a week, really. So I'm not sure how you managed to do that. And also a very interesting fact, which also resonates with me, is that you're probably an ex-World of Warcraft player or a current World of Warcraft player.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And thank you for the introduction. I used to play WoW quite a bit, especially with Kevin, who is now my co-founder. So yeah, that's true. That's a good one.
So do you have, nowadays, as a co-founder of ScrapingBee, do you really find the time for it, or?
No, I actually quit playing a few years ago, like when I was in university, because it was not as fun as it used to be, at least for me. Like, I don't know, like with the extension and all, I think I stopped playing after Cataclysm. And, but yeah, no, it's no longer part of my life. Do you guys play?
So I used to play WoW quite a lot. I've also ended up on Cataclysm. The Mist of Pandaria didn't bot me with that pandas idea.
Yeah.
pretty much. I felt that things went really wrong at some point at Blizzard, although I'm a big Blizzard fan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they probably should have stopped years ago and worked on something else, but
I think Artur and Marek, you didn't play a lot of online games, right?
No, I'm more like strategic games guys, like Civilization or Tropico. So something which you can easily stop, exit, and have life.
I, at some point of my life, played actually quite significant amount of time, but it was rather a game that didn't needed for me to dive in for longer. So it was like Counter-Strike or FIFA. Yeah, so I could just start. Play game for an hour or two or a half of the evening, and then stop at some point, and I didn't need to think about it until the next session.
Yeah, so it also had that team component. And I just recall that WoW was very specific when it comes to raiding, having the guilds, having the beat teams. Yeah, that was
almost like a second job. I remember,
yeah, totally.
If you wanted to get into a guild, you had to apply, to write a cover letter. There was some interview. How much time? Yeah.
That's a world inside of a world.
Yeah.
Did they do the live coding on those interviews or to the
Not
guilds?
necessarily, but if you would be taking a role of a damage dealer, you had to go through a test so that your damage per second is at least at some level. Otherwise, you couldn't apply to the guild. Funny times. I like to retrospect on that. But when it comes to Pierre, you're our guest. Obviously, the show is about you. So can you tell us more about yourselves so that our listeners can just know you better?
Sure. So my name is Pierre. I'm French. I live in France. I'm 30. I'm currently in a very small town south of France, far from all the big cities. And 5 years ago, I quit my job to try to go the bootstrapping route, indie hacking route, whatever. Like, we've been reading a lot about this whole world with Kevin, my co-founder, on stuff like, indie hacker, Rob Whaling, start small, stay small, and all those things. And we really wanted to build a business. Some might call it lifestyle businesses, but like a business where we could earn a significant amount of money while being free and master of our time. So we started working on some things, a Chrome extension to monitor prices online, a price monitoring tool for e-commerces, which was a complete failure. And then 3 years ago, we started working on a web scraping API. And this time we got lucky, it worked well. And we're now a small company. We're 4 full-time work employees. And overall, we're a team of between 7 and 10. And that's where we're at now.
And where it all started, Pierre. So before you went to that route, how did you get in IT? Pretty much. That's a question which we used to ask.
Okay, that's a long story, but to be short, so after high school, I went to university, but I chose to learn to study economics. And I did the first year, I passed, then I started my second year, and I realized I don't want to do this. Like, I will never enjoy doing this all my life. I don't want the kind of job that are that I'm going to be able to have after the university. So I switched to computer science during the year. Actually, again, Kevin helped me here because he knew someone at his university who offered me a spot to join during the middle of the year. And that's how I ended up doing computer sciences. I always liked computer. I was not uh, I was not coding at 7 years old, but at 15, 16, I just learned about C and programming and how a computer works, and I enjoyed it, and so that's how I ended up learning all of this.
So, what was your first program that you implemented? Do you remember, maybe?
I think I remember. So at that time, I was watching a lot of the TV show 24 Hours. I don't know if you remember. It's like okay, so 24 Hours.
And that's like a French specific show?
No, it's an American show. So maybe the um, the American name is different. It's a 24 basically with a Kiefer Sutherland. It's like a super spy agent saving the world, and I just build kind of a text-only interface that would trigger some of the famous 24 line from the TV show. So yeah, that was probably the first program, like just learning about STD out, I think, at that time, and STD in, and those kind of things. And
so that was already C?
Sorry?
That was already
it was
C programming language.
Yeah, I learned programming with C.
That's challenging route to
It
program.
was challenging. I mean, I didn't know anything else. So for me, it was just how programming was. And in France, we had this very big community called Le Site du Zéro. If you have some French listeners older than 20, they know it. And they had these big free tutorials about programming, and it was all in C. And so after you ended up learning about the pointers, and that's where it starts to be hard, and it starts to get complicated. And
memory allocation, freeing all that stuff.
Exactly. And an array of pointers of pointer, and all this stuff.
Okay, so I guess that at this point we can slowly move on to the main block of the conversation. So perhaps let's start with the first one. So Pierre, in the past, as we already unraveled to our listeners, you were a data engineer in your day-to-day job. So then at some point you decided to take yourself to another level together with Kevin. So how did you find the idea for the business in your like day-to-day job? How our listeners could look for such opportunities in their today jobs?
Okay, sure. So first, when we started working with Kevin while I was working full time. And the first product we built was Shop2List, which was a price monitoring tool. And actually I got the idea thanks to my girlfriend, who was just, saving all those product links on the internet. And the day they were big sales, she would check each link individually to see if she could save some money. And she said, hey, can't you build some kind of tool for me to automate that? And so we built Shop2List, where it was a Chrome extension. You could save a product on your dashboard, and it would send you an email as soon as the price dropped. So we built that while we were working each full time. Afterwards, we noticed that it would never work, so I quit, because we noticed that there might be some opportunity here to build a price monitoring tool for e-commerces. So the thing is, I didn't find the idea for this thanks to my job. However, ScrapingBee, for example, which was a product we built afterwards, solved the problem I had in my day-to-day job. And so to answer your question, if I were a developer right now, and if I wanted to find some pain point to solve, I would try to check, okay, what are the scripts or code I write that are not, how to say, that don't add a lot of value, and that I'll always rewrite the same kind of things, And so for web scraping, that was it. When you're doing web scraping, you're always doing the same kind of things. You rotate user agents. You rotate between a pool of proxies. You have to spin up some Chrome headless instances somewhere. And it's a mess because you have to take a lot of frames. And it usually doesn't add any value to the company. You're just doing this because you need some kind of data. From this data, extract information, and then you can add some value. So whenever you find yourself spending 2 hours on Stack Overflow and copy pasting some snippets without thinking too much about it, there's probably some things to build here.
So this sounds a bit like trying to find that tedious, repeatable kind of implementation, and just ask yourself if that's something that somebody would like to delegate somewhere else, and probably have this as an off-the-shelf thingy.
Exactly.
That's a nice heuristic. I'm just, I think a lot of the things which we as developers write is quite repeatable, even
Yeah.
though they all promised that everything will be buildable out of blocks, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly. Another one could be, is there any libraries you use that are hard to use, hard to set up? So, for example, one library is I could like Puppeteer, it's like Chrometless driver libraries. Well, it's not that easy to set up. So, of course, if you just want to use it for, 1 hour, it will be easy. But if you want to scale it, it's going to be hard to do it on your local machine. So that can be also a good heuristic. Things like Tesseract, which is a UCR, well, it can be tricky too. Basically, all those libraries with many dependencies, binaries, with lots of infrastructure, with big infrastructure needs, I think there are some pain here that are worth solving. And bonus, if those libraries are very popular on a GitHub or Stack Overflow, it means that there's probably lots of people who would pay for your API service, whatever.
Okay, so do I read this correctly? Then one of the other idea could be trying to really leverage the open source, in a sense.
Yeah, definitely. Like you wrap, it's all the API we sell are just wrappers around other project, like let it be database or data processing thing. But the more complex the product are, the tool is, the more value your wrapper will be. Like, do you know Banner Beer? It's another example I have in mind. It's like it allows you to auto-generate videos and picture based on some templates you create. And you could argue that it's just a big wrapper around FFmpeg. It's like a tool which is very, hard to use, command line tool, lots of option, and there's lots of example like this.
This reminds me the example which Arthur you frequently give with RabbitMQ, right? So what did CloudMQP do? So that they are very good at administering RabbitMQ, scaling RabbitMQ, which is difficult on its own. So they provide a service, really.
Yeah.
They take all the pain on them.
Yeah, exactly. I know as a developer, I used to think that if I have trouble doing something, it means I need to be better. So yeah, it probably means that we all need to be better somehow. But sometimes the problem is not me. It's just that, this thing is complicated. This thing is hard. And other developers are having the same issue, On average, we're average, So if you're having an issue, chances are that lots of other people are having the same issue.
Yeah, so this sounds like a good idea to target developers as an potential clients. Yeah? Do you feel it will work the same with companies or with ordinary people not connected to the IT?
What's good with developers is that since developer salaries are quite high, their time is very valuable. So if you can build a solution that save a developer 2 hours, 3 hours a week, it's probably going to be something worth buying for the company. So that's why I think developers tool are a very good niche.
And I feel like we are the good testers on its own of our product.
Yeah, once you build the product, I actually enjoy building for developers because it's easy to get feedback from them. It's also very easy to get some bug report. Like sometimes I even have people sending me the bug plus the solution. So it's awesome. So yeah, it's I enjoy working with developer day to day.
And how did you like the switch from a totally developer role to a leader of a small business at the very beginning? What were the advantages and the disadvantages of this switch?
That's a good question. So, I mean, what I enjoyed as a developer, what I always enjoyed was just building things, and building things that people use is really, it makes me happy. For sure, right now, there's many other things to manage, like support, employees, a bit of marketing, monitoring statuses, and there's much more pressure to it too. Like at the beginning, when something broke, well, nobody used it, so whatever, it was not important. Now, right now, as soon as we have the smallest infrastructure issues, I have tens of customers angry on the support, and I have our support engineer telling me, Pierre, what's going on? There's lots of angry people, and I'm trying to understand what's going on Datadog with the graph and all. So overall, I'm learning a lot. But yeah, sometimes I wish I was just a simple developer, building my thing, improving my code, debugging, tweaking, optimizing performances, like just crafting. Sometimes I miss that a bit.
So, what is the hardest challenge for you right now, in running the company as a former developer?
So the hardest challenge would be the infrastructure, I think, management. Like, I'm very not good at this whole DevOps thing. So I'm just learning by reading. And we're reaching a point where I'm going to hire some freelance or someone to help me out with this. Like,
Are you using some sort of tools to like help you out, or you are
no,
running everything from your terminal and getting
exactly.
crazy with kubectl?
Everything from my terminal SSH the old way. So it used to work when we only had a couple of servers to manage, but we now have around 75. And so, of course, what's good with Bash is like you can always automate everything, but I'm reaching a point where, yeah, I'm automating too much things. I feel the wrong way. And it's the biggest pain point is like, so I have some servers down and I don't know why. And so all I can do is not even reboot it. I have to reinstall it because when I reboot it, it just shut down again. And so it might be some kind of weird memory leak or disk usage thing. But I don't know. If I were an expert, I would SSH on the machine, try to read the logs and all, but I don't know how to do all that. So I just reinstall it.
Tap into the processes to get it all out. But then again, I'm finding this confusing to establish how do you divide your time now, since you are running that business. And I understood from the other podcasts which I listened to that you're doing the on calls also. You are developing the product, and now we also learned that you're dealing with the operations part. So I don't think that's 50-50 when it comes to to the time spent, right? How does it look?
It really depends. Like when everything is smooth, I don't spend that much time on the DevOps part of things, like I'm talking about it now because it's been my whole day yesterday, basically. Usually I'm spending quite a bit of time with, so Etienne, our full-time developer, we're talking about product improvement. I'm merging, reviewing some PR. I'm doing all those stuff. I'm spending a bit of time improving the performance of the product. The on calls, I don't know. I no longer do a lot of on calls. Like Kevin is doing 99% of it. He's handling the whole marketing, and I'd say I'm doing 30% monitoring. Like everything running as expecting. 30% planning. What should we do next? Hiring some people, writing some job application job offer and all, and 40% coding, debugging, optimizing, DevOps, those kind of things.
We used to call these kind of people one-man army.
Yeah, that's a bit where we're at now.
Okay, understandable. As far as I recall, your team, when it comes to core members, is like 4 people now, or did this change?
Now we're 4. So there's Nizar, is our support engineer. So because we have a very technical product, the support is very important. And Nizar knows a lot about HTTP, web scraping. If you have some issue, he'll has all the tools to try to understand if it's coming from your driver version, the language you use, all of that. There is Etienne, our main developers, developing all those new features the API offers. There's Kevin, co-founder, doing all the marketing and the legal stuff. And as marketing, mainly SEO, so managing the whole content of the blog, which is a lot of work. And there's me doing, a bit of everything else.
Mm-hmm. So we'll get more into the challenges, architectures, and practices in a moment. I would like to just quickly loop back to the thread which we had about the idea for the business. And I think that, we as developers, we are kind of hired to solve a problem or actually deliver a solution. And this also always has a context. Like in your story, you helped out your girlfriend at the very beginning when it comes to providing a solution to her. Later on, you saw an opportunity of extracting some of the tedious work and logic into a separate product. But then again, this is also what we are trying to do with our podcasts here. We're trying to help people to improve, to learn new things. So we're trying to get involved with the developers community to help them now, right? And I guess with you guys, this was very same. Although in your case, you firstly had the idea for the product, and then you were seeking for the community, or there was the community first, and then the idea for the product came, because this can go both ways, right?
What product are you talking about? Like Shop2List or ScrapingBee?
Let's stay with the ScrapingBee, I would say.
So ScrapingBee, what was funny was that we got the idea while building Pricing Bot. We were using a web scraping API, which was not that good, and we thought, hey, we can do better than this. And so that's how we got the idea. About the community thing, especially Kevin was involved in a few growth hacking web scraping communities beforehand, because actually he wrote a web scraping book in Java, a web scraping book about Java before this whole thing. So he had a small foot, in the community. And I definitely believe that you should get involved in the community first. So you should do it mainly for 2 reasons. First one is understanding your community, understanding the pain points, trying to see the kind of question the community is asking, the kind of thing that make them happy or unhappy with the current tools. And then once you've done that, it can be a tremendous source of feedback and maybe initial traction. So what you should never do is subscribe to a community to expect user from day one. It doesn't work like that. You should subscribe, get involved, be helpful. Don't even mention your product. Just try to be helpful. If someone has an issue, you want to build a product to solve their issue, don't mention your product. Just say, hey, I got this issue too. Maybe I'm considering building something for it, but can you tell me a bit more about your issue? Things like that. Just get information, get known, make some friends, and afterwards it's make things 10 times easier.
Yeah, I guess this is the same as we kind of thought. We had this idea in the very beginning that we were going to look out for user groups over LinkedIn, over Facebook, stuff like that, and try to like convey the idea, the message there. And lately we concluded that it doesn't really make sense, because otherwise we would be building something for a group instead of building something which we really feel, like from the bottom of our hearts, really here. So yeah, I'm really happy that somebody out of our little group here, and somebody in the world like you, Pierre, is also thinking about this way. So then I think we can move to the part when we're going to talk about a little bit about the challenges which you had with ScrapingBee. And I know that Arthur, he has a head full of ideas of questions here, so I will pass the voice to you, Arthur.
Yeah, thanks. The web scraping in general, I feel it's not that broad idea known to everyone. So maybe Pierre, you could start with describing what it is, so to be clear with all our listeners.
ScrapingBee is a web scripting API. So basically, the number one feature is like you give us a URL, you get the HTML of it, no matter what. So you don't get blocked, you don't get captchas, you don't get 500, you get the HTML. On our end, we manage a lot of things that can make web scraping tricky. Like we manage the proxies, so the IP don't get banned. And we manage also the headless brothers. So let's say you want to scrape a website with a lot of JavaScript. If you're doing a curl to this website, even with the best IP and the good headers, you're going to get probably a blank page because the web page won't load the JavaScript necessary to load the rest of the content, like Ajax call and all. So what we do is like we run this URL. We open this URL with real browser, the same kind of Chrome you and I use, and we return to use the HTML. We also recently developed a lot of other features like data parsing. Parsing HTML it's not really hard, but can be a pain to set up. You have to learn yet another library and all. So we allowed people to just send us a JSON of extraction rules, and you get back a nice formatted JSON, some kind of JavaScript scenario. So let's say you want to click on a button or scroll before getting the results. We can do that too. And those are the main features of ScrapingBee.
Okay, so you mentioned few things that the ScrapingBee needs to do in, let's say, behind the scene. What do you feel is the most interesting and what is the most difficult thing to do, to deliver the output to your client?
Definitely. So the way it works is like when we get a URL, and it doesn't work, we retry it with other proxy providers or other settings, And since we try to offer a very good success rate, sometimes it means we have to retry multiple times the URL, But what it means is that sometimes for a big success rate, we have a very high response rate, because we retry sequentially multiple times. So finding the good trade-off between success rate and response time can be tricky sometimes. You have to find a good balance. Of course, we could also do things in parallel, but we currently don't do that for several reasons. So that's an interesting thing. Another things I like is like we currently have lots of usage, and sometimes things break because a website is no longer allowing some kind of request to pass or things like that. And then we update the scrapers and we see magically everything works again and customers are happy. And so I think that's the two things, the two biggest issue we're we're having currently. Yeah, Greg.
So the things are typically getting very interesting at scale. So I recall from one of the interviews which you gave that you're having around 500 customers, at least at that time. How does this correspond to the load? Do you can share that information? How many requests, scrapping requests you get?
We're managing hundreds millions of requests per week. So it's definitely, for example, our biggest competitor I know is doing 10 times that, So we're not the biggest company in the sector, far from it, but it starts to get challenging at that level, in terms of bandwidth, in terms of computing power for the headless Chrome, in terms of SLA also. As soon as you have some issue, it gets noticed quite fast. So yeah, that's the scale we're talking about.
And I believe this kind of volume also produces a heckload of like logs, diagnostic information, stuff like that. You also have to store it somewhere, right? So how do you deal with that? Do you like implement like traceability so that you know what happened with each and every individual request, things like that?
So we use Datadog for the log management, and so it's crazy expensive, but it's just amazing. And for each individual logs, we have all the parameters used, which allows us to make a very nice statistic. Like I can know at any point what website a user is scraping, what the success rate is, what the success rate is for one domain, one proxy provider, one kind of parameters. As soon as we add another parameters to the API, I can also see, okay, what are the kind of user who are using it for what? Is it a popular feature or not? So we have. I'm a bit proud of this, and Etienne worked a lot on it 6 months ago. We have a very good overview of how the API is doing, the kind of features that are used. We use Datadog for that. When we have a bug, we just analyze the whole trace. We have a big try catch very up in the application. We log the whole exception. And then every day, Etienne in the morning is just check, okay, are there new weird exception? Because at these scales, you always have some kind of exception. Like sometimes it's a very low level issue, a seg fault somewhere in a OS libraries. Sometimes it's a weird character in the HTML that is not parsed correctly by Beautiful Soup, let's say. So there's always some kind of issue. The idea is just to try to fix as much as possible.
Yeah, so you told us that you have the Datadog, which is really helpful for developers. Did you manage to implement some kind of auto-detecting problems with some particular cases? That because you told us also that sometimes you need to jump in, correct something in the scraper, and now it works. Yeah, so is it a manual process, or you managed to automate it like you really like?
We've automated a lot of things like problem detection, alerting, the fixing. I mean, we have some automating fixing in place, but the fix will never be as good as the manual ones. So usually what happens is like, if for sometimes a website is blocked, we'll automatically find a way around, and then we'll have to manually jump in to make it more efficient and faster.
There was also one interesting question which we had falling into the sensitive data area and also the legal stuff. You said that you're not dealing with the legal stuff, let's call it day to day. Somebody else is handling this over the course of the days. But are you able to point out, some legal limitations which you are trying to, like preserve or obey? Because providing a generic API like you do,
Sure.
allows some misuse, right? So I guess you're pretty good protected by some lawyers on this one.
I mean, what's good is that for the worst illegal use case of web scraping, using ScrapingBee wouldn't make any economic sense at all. So, for example, if someone wanted to, okay, let's say the worst case scenario, wanted to DDoS some website using ScrapingBee, it would be probably one of the most expensive way to do so. So that's not an issue we're having, and probably we'd get DDoSed before the target website, so that's not a big risk for us. Then there's a bot automation issue, like logging to creating some fake account and all. And again, there's some limitation on ScrapingBee. The one is a timeout one, like there's a 30-second timeout for the JavaScript rendering thing. So there's not much thing you can do in 30 seconds to automate lots of stuff, nasty stuff.
So you mean like they would be using you as a really a bot network?
Yeah, and it wouldn't work very well. Like, for example, you can't use ScrapingBee to buy some sneakers on Nike.com, like it wouldn't work. You wouldn't have enough time. So ScrapingBee has really been built to get only public information at scale. And this is where web scraping is completely legal, where you can get publicly available information. So there's not that many trouble we can get in.
And I guess you don't do a lot of caching or keeping the copy of that data anyhow.
No.
So
we don't for legal reason, technical reason. Like we never cache or register the content of the page we scrape. We store the URL. We store maybe the IP address of the client. But it's only stored for 15 days. And we don't store that many things.
Yeah, so mostly for your internal purposes, like accounting, and then just in case probably of an audit or something, right? So
yeah. The personal information, of course, like any businesses, we have to get your name, addresses. The credit card number are not stored, managed by us. Like it's all Stripe. We deal with this. So no, we don't. Like basically, if someone tomorrow had access to our production database, he wouldn't be able to learn anything except get our users' email addresses. That's the only sensitive information this person would get.
Okay, so now just curious about the architecture part. Perhaps let's start from the execution environment. How do you run your system? That's some of a cloud solution. That's, I don't know, like AWS, Azure, something else.
So the main application API is running on a Clever Cloud, which is kind of a French alternative to Heroku.
Okay.
So it's completely managed. It auto scales, when we because our load is very uneven. We have some big customer doing some burst from 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. and then nothing. So the load can go from 1x to 5x during the day quite often. So we're using this. We also have lots of server providers, we have 3, and we have pools of Chrome instances there with load balancer. And so if somehow one provider is down, the load is redirected to the others. And the last, that's our architecture is quite simple because, as I told you, I'm not very good at DevOps. So I tried to keep it as simple as possible, like some servers behind some load balancer and clever cloud to manage the whole thing and redirect the traffic.
Why Chrome? Actually, yeah, we all heard that Chrome is consuming a lot of RAM, and I wanted to ask you specifically if you had like questions from your customers. By example, if you could run it on Opera or on different browser, because it will then render somehow differently. Have you heard this request from your client?
No, not really, because usually, so people using the screenshot API could be interested in this, but basically differences between the browser are just basically how the CSS is rendered, you know? So because our customer are only interested in the HTML, they don't really care. And for the people who are using some JavaScript interaction, well, Chrome is the standard anyway. So whatever interaction they're trying to mimic are going to work in Chrome. So, and it's only basic interaction like click, scroll, type. So we're not having that kind of issue yet.
How hard it is for you? Because we all know that for front-end developers, it's always hard to get ready for new Chrome. So how hard is it for you to upgrade your stack to the new Chrome release? Like, did you ever had big blow up on the production because of new Chrome version, or?
No. And that's a good point, because every time I update the Chrome, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to be a bit smarter and just update 5% of it and see if it breaks everything. But I never did it. So far, it didn't break. I mean, we never update Chrome the day it releases. No, there's usually 10 days gap between, the new version and the one used in production. So my guess is okay, if Chrome mess up big times in 10 days, they're going to fix it. But those are the kind of things I want to hire someone for. I want to make the update process much more professional and much safer. So that's actually a very good question.
You've already mentioned approach to the releases, even if it's not yet in place, canary release or something, whatever we call it. But maybe you could share some other principles or good practices which you successfully managed to implement on the ScrapingBee.
So one thing Etienne worked a lot on was about the continuous integration. And so I'm quite happy, because right now we can successfully deploy in 5 minutes in production 10 times a day. So nowadays it's kind of a standard, but for us it was a bit tricky. So we spin up lots of GitHub action. We run all the tests. The action will spin up some Chrome headless, to be sure that everything is communicated correctly between the database, the Redis, the headless, and the API. And so now whenever we push, we have all the tests running, green, and then we can easily merge, and it can easily be in production in 5 minutes, which means that sometimes, we got a support issue, and 10 minutes later on production, it fixed. So that's something we're proud about. We've spent a lot of time on the monitoring. We have lot of things that could fail. So we have lots of alert in Datadog, sending email alert, Slack alert. We're also using Checkly to monitor the overall. It would be some kind of end-to-end monitoring. Checkly is making API calls the same way another user would make API call. So we're monitoring response time and success rate from it. We're individually monitoring each server we have, both on Checkly and Datadog. On Datadog, we're monitoring the metrics like memory, disk usage, CPU, and load. And on Checkly, again, we're just sending some requests to it and checking that everything works as expecting. And but sometimes, like for example, yesterday I have some big issues because the problem was in the load balancer, and it's a managed load balancer, and I just couldn't fix it. So I ended up switching load balancer provider. But yeah, we're trying to do our best to monitor as much thing as possible.
Yeah, that's the trickiest part when you're selling or delegating the infrastructure somewhere else, and then the only thing which you can do is either raise a support ticket or do a total switch.
Yeah, I did both, but yeah, the person on support, he didn't understand what was going on. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, this is this is life systems operating, earning money and and having their problems. So,
exactly.
So Pierre, when you're coding, I'm trying to like go very close to your keyboard right now.
Okay.
And the services. What kind of like programming language do you really use there? This is still something which we don't know.
Python. The API is 80% Python, a bit of JavaScript to interact with Puppeteer, but it's all Python and a bit of Bash when I try to be a DevOps. But Python with Flask, so which is a framework like a Django. And I mean, the first language I learned in university was actually Python. So it was funny. I mean, our teacher was a bit ahead of its time because at that time, like 10 years ago, 12 years ago, Python was not really popular. It was still this language used by researcher and student. And our teacher just loved it and made us learn programming by using Python. And so I enjoyed it. And we ended up finding a boilerplate on GitHub, for quickly building a SaaS application in Python, because there's lots of things we didn't want to recode: user management, email, password, all the things you don't want to do it. So yeah, we ended up choosing something we knew and didn't think too much about it.
This sounds like all the planets did align perfectly, because you were there in the university. You started up with Python, which I also recall as mostly used when it comes to the academics. Also, the machine learning context also uses heavily Python. The data lakes, stuff like that, also relies heavily on Python. So I guess this language gains more traction, and then you found out that template. Yeah, that would be an understandable decision to pick this stack.
Yeah, I also had a question if you are, for spaces or tabs, but now it's the question is irrelevant anymore.
Yeah, and especially since I'm coding on PyCharm, I don't think I know what it's using behind the hood. Like, I think it's spaces, but because it's all auto-formatted at some point. So we're using a thing called Black, which is a Python code formatter. And I think there's another formatting step on the GitHub action. So I don't have a lot to add here.
We are all here JetBrains people, so
yeah. Okay. So welcome to the JetBrains fanboy club. It's like sending our love to the JetBrains team. We're going to mention you guys over here. But then again, Pierre. So while you're like building up the product, because I know that at least this is what I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're the only true developer on the team?
Etienne is also a true developer. Kevin is a true developer, but he switched career, so he no longer is. But he has the skills.
Okay, so then in that setup, you probably share some like principles, some approaches which you use. Like we're looking for keywords like I don't know, perhaps attempting to implement clean architecture, employing test-driven development, BDD. I believe that test suite on the GitHub actions is also running a set of tests. So what kind of engineering then principles you apply on code level?
So on code level, I'd say there's two principles we're trying to follow. So TDD, which is something Etienne has pushed and is always something I believed in, is something we try to do, especially when developing a whole new feature. We're like, okay, I really like TDD. Like we're all trying to design how the code will work from the test. And so they'll write the test first, like, okay, how should that part of the code behaves in this case, this case, this case. So we're trying to follow that. And it's quite a success. Also, we're trying to make the code, I'm with many short function, small function, and very simple. And also Python allows you to make those magical one-liner thing. You call like enum zip group by, boom, you have this amazing
Product.
whatever function you wanted to do. And we're not doing that because it's just a hell to maintain and debug. So it's fun to do it, like if you want to learn about the language or whatever. But I'll always say to Etienne, like, let's just write it like I know nothing about Python. When I'm reading the PR, I don't want to have to open the documentation and try to understand what it does. So those would be the two principles we try to follow the most during development to make everything a bit faster, easier, and easier to maintain.
So, as we are slowly getting to the end of today's episode, Pierre, we would like you to share with our listeners your words of wisdom. So, some principles that you think, or statements that you think that our listeners can live by.
Sure. So, what I would advise, like, if you're a developer and if one day you want to build a product, do it yourself, sell it and live the entrepreneurial life, first would be pay attention to what you do day to day, what your team is doing day to day, that they don't like to do, that they spend a lot of time to do, and what your colleagues and even colleagues from other companies are doing that they don't like to do. Like there's so much you can learn by just looking at how other works, especially in terms of business ID. So there are things I like everywhere you have two people working on the same Excel or Google sheet, there's a product to be made here. Every time people share a Google Drive, there's probably a product to be made here. It's not because you're a developer that you need to build a product for developers. So just if you're lucky enough to be in a company with a sizable amount of people, pay attention to who does what and who don't like to do what they do. A second thing would be the code is not the goal. Like too many times I've seen developers who had some kind of business ID, good or bad, like it's always hard to judge an ID, and they just code it and build it and just add more feature and be like, okay, I'm going to add those 10 GitHub action with auto deploy, auto scalability, auto reverse, whatever thing to have 10 live backup is EU East 1 is down, those kind of things. It's very cool if you want to learn, but do not forget what your end goal is. And if your end goal is to build a business that sustain your lifestyle, you need to think about the users. So talk to the users, think on what the users want, think on how you could help them, not you. And the third one would be that you just need to learn marketing. There is no way around it. Like, I know as a developer, it's easy to get lost in the coding and expect people to just, find your product and give you money, but it just doesn't work that way. You might read some example about people who managed to pull that off, but it's extremely rare. So every day you should think about, okay, how I'm going to get new users, how I'm going to acquire customers, what acquisition channel should I try?
Yeah, this is something that also applies to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to think more about marketing.
And not only, when it comes to us running a podcast, I really like that third point. I liked all of them, but I really loved the last one. Why? Because I think that what it's really missing from day-to-day work for developers is having that marketing skill, because sometimes we're trying to sell an idea for a change, for an adjustment, and we fail to do so because we don't know how. We don't know how to do it effectively, and learning just a little bit of marketing can actually help to have that buy-in, because you have to have that buy-in sometimes from your managers, from your team, really,
Exactly.
when you would like to convince everybody.
I agree. And as a developer, that's what I saw in my previous job is like, if you're a developer and if you're trying to sell, I don't know, a new library, a new design pattern or methodology, whatever, do not talk about how it's going to change your life, but talk how it's going to change their lives, So as a manager, try to sell, if we do this that way, we're going to need 20% less engineer in 1 year, probably. If we do this one way, we can save 15% infrastructure cost in 2 months. And those are the kind of things that manager likes a lot. So you need to, sell, value, not features.
Always be data driven. Yeah, data is always the easiest to sell when you talk to other people. Yeah, completely agree. And I also really have to admire this focus on users, not the code, because I completely agree that the code is there to support the users, not the users are there to support or consume the code. Yeah,
Exactly. And
that's the gold sentence.
somehow it's always reassuring, to work on code because the code is nice, the code is predictable, the code can move fast, especially nowadays. If you're good at what you're doing, you can develop complicated feature in 1-2 days and be like, wow, I'm good at what I'm doing. But in the end, no one's going to use it if you don't think about the user first.
Yeah. So I believe this is the point when, if possible, if you have something to share in terms of like resources, so the valuable, maybe some websites, some blogs possibly, or Twitter accounts to follow, I believe that would be really valuable to our listeners to have them on hand.
So, about the books, one book I always advise, which is probably for developers not very experienced, but it's Hello Startup by Yegveneth. I don't remember the last name. It's called Hello Startup, and it shows you like basically all the steps you should follow if you want to build a product from, 0 to 1. And it talks about lots of things. I love it a lot. I would also read all the indie hackers interview. Like it's all lots of different profiles, mainly from people who went from full-time job to building their own business. And you always see that, getting the first customers was the most important part by far. So I think those are two great resources to begin with.
Maybe tell us and our listeners how we can get in touch with you, where we can learn more about your product, ScrapingBee.
So ScrapingBee, you can go on scrapingbee.com. That's the landing page of the product. About me, I'm quite active on Twitter at Pierre de Wulf. You can, if you want to talk to me, just send me an email because I've received too much Twitter direct message. So Pierre at scrapingbee.com, and your email will be answered. There's no doubt about it. And that's where you can reach out to me.
Okay, awesome. So I guess that at this point we've reached the time for our episode today. We are already over 1 hour. That was a very wonderful hour. Pierre, we're very happy to meet you. We're very happy that you've joined us today on the show. We're also very happy to have all our listeners together with us here. Guys, if you would like to learn more about Pierre, we're going to link his accounts as mentioned in the show notes. Also, if you'd like to learn more about ScrapingBee, we're going to leave a couple of sentences and links and references to the product inside of the show notes. And yes, I guess at this point, there's nothing else to say. Then thank you very much once again. Hopefully, Pierre, you've enjoyed the episode with us.
Yeah, I had an awesome time. Thanks a lot.
And it's time to say bye-bye now. So take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That's all for today. Thanks for spending your time with us.
Visit our page on Facebook and Twitter, leave us a comment under the episode, subscribe to the updates, and share it with others.
We would like to hear your feedback so that we can prepare more interesting content for you to enjoy. Hear you next time!